I never thought I'd find the letter that changed everything. It was just another boring Saturday afternoon of cleaning my room when I spotted the envelope, tucked between my father's old leather-bound books on the shelf. The handwriting on it was unmistakably his, shaky but deliberate, like he'd taken great care with each word. My name is Avery, and until that moment I thought I knew my family. I really did. Sweetie, don't forget we're having guests for dinner. My mother's voice carried up the stairs, all sugar-coated authority. I ignored her, my fingers trembling as I opened the envelope. My dearest Avery, the letter began. If you're reading this, I've either worked up the courage to tell you in person or… There was a visible pause in the writing, a slight smudge where he'd hesitated. Or I've run out of time. The doctors gave me 6 months. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The world tilted sideways. I had to sit down on my bed, the letter shaking in my hands. 6 months? But Dad had been at work just this morning, running his construction company like always. He'd made me pancakes, for God's sake. Avery! Did you hear me? Mom's heels clicked on the stairs. I quickly folded the letter, shoving it under my pillow. She appeared in my doorway, perfect as always in her designer dress, not a strand of her dark hair out of place. Lucas is coming over tonight. Please wear something appropriate. Lucas, her new business partner who'd been showing up at our house more and more lately. Something about him made my skin crawl, despite his perfect smile and expensive suits. Is Dad joining us? I asked, watching her face carefully. A flicker of something crossed her features. He's working late again. You know how he is with that new project. Liar. She had to be lying. How could she stand there planning dinner parties if she knew? Unless… Mom, I started, my voice catching. Is there something wrong with Dad? She paused, hands still on the doorframe. For a second, I thought I saw real emotion in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual polished smile. Don't be silly, darling. Everything's fine. Just be downstairs by 7. As her heels clicked away, I pulled out the letter again. There was more, much more, but I couldn't read it through my tears. One thing was clear. Either my mother didn't know about Dad's condition or she was putting on the performance of a lifetime. And I was going to find out which. That dinner was the longest night of my life. I kept watching Dad's hands as he cut his steak, searching for any tremor, any sign that would confirm what I'd read. But he was the same as always, steady, strong, telling his usual bad jokes that made Mom roll her eyes. Lucas sat across from me, his charm cranked up to 11. So, Avery, your mother tells me you're quite the artist? I pushed my food around my plate. I guess. She's being modest, Dad said, pride warming his voice. You should see the mural she painted in her room. Pure talent. Mom cleared her throat. Speaking of Avery's room, I think it's time we discussed redecorating. The whole house could use an update, don't you think, Lucas? I watched Lucas's hand brush Mom's as he reached for his wine glass. The gesture was quick, casual, but deliberate. My stomach turned. Actually, I said, my voice stronger than I felt, Dad, can we talk after dinner? Just us. Before he could answer, Mom jumped in. Your father has an early meeting tomorrow, sweetie. And Lucas is going to help me plan the charity gala next month. We need your father's input on some things. It's fine, Cassandra, Dad said, but I caught the weariness in his tone. Avery and I can chat in my study. Later, sitting in the familiar leather chair across from his desk, I clutched the letter in my pocket. But looking at him, at the way he smiled at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners, I couldn't do it. Couldn't ask if he was dying. Couldn't shatter this moment. What's on your mind, kiddo? I miss this, I said instead. We don't talk much anymore. Something flickered across his face. Pain? Regret? I know. Work spin. He paused, rubbing his temple. How about we start having breakfast together? Just us every morning. Really? Hope bloomed in my chest. Really? Starting tomorrow. As I headed back to my room, I heard voices from Mom's study. The door was cracked open just enough. "Can't keep this up forever, Cassandra," Lucas was saying. "He'll figure it out eventually." "He won't," Mom's voice was steel. "And by then, everything will be in place. Just stick to the plan." I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding. What plan? What were they hiding? Dad's letter burned in my pocket, and suddenly I wasn't sure which secret was worse, the one he was keeping from me, or the one Mom and Lucas were keeping from him. The morning Dad didn't come down for breakfast, I knew something was wrong. We'd kept our promise, every morning for 2 weeks, sharing coffee, his and hot chocolate mine, talking about everything and nothing. But today, his chair was empty. I found him in his home office, slumped over his desk. "Dad!" My voice cracked as I shook his shoulder. He stirred, slowly lifting his head. His skin was gray, dark circles under his eyes. "Sorry, kiddo," he mumbled. "Must have fallen asleep working." But the computer screen was dark, and scattered across his desk were medical bills and insurance papers. One caught my eye: Stage 4 treatment options. "You need to go to the hospital," I said, already reaching for my phone. "No hospitals." He gripped my wrist, surprisingly strong. "Your mother can't know." "Not yet." "But..." "Promise me, Avery." Before I could answer, Lucas's voice carried down the hall. "Thomas." Cassandra asked me to grab those contract files. Dad straightened, shuffling papers into a drawer. "Come in." Lucas entered, all polished charm in his tailored suit. His eyes flickered between us, taking in the scene. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Dad said. "Just reviewing some paperwork with Avery." "The Morrison project?" Lucas leaned against the doorframe. "I could help with that. I have experience in commercial development." "That won't be necessary." Dad's tone was firm, but I caught him wincing as he stood. "Actually," Lucas smiled, "Cassandra and I were hoping to discuss some ideas about the company's future direction. Over dinner, perhaps." Company. Mom and Lucas had been having a lot of discussions about the company lately. Too many. "I need to get Dad some water," I cut in, pulling him toward the door. In the kitchen, I watched him sink into a chair, his hands shaking as he took the glass. "What's really in those papers?" I asked quietly. He looked at me for a long moment. "Insurance policies, investment accounts, things you'll need to know about later." "Dad, please." "Your mother," he said carefully, "has always been ambitious." "But Lucas..." "There's something not right there. I've started moving some assets, setting up protections. Just in case." My throat tightened. "In case of what?" Crash from the hallway made us both jump. Mom stood in the doorway, a broken vase at her feet, staring at the papers Dad had forgotten he was holding. "Thomas," she said, her voice deadly quiet, "what are you doing?" Behind her, Lucas appeared, his usual smile gone. And in that moment, I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. Not just greed or ambition, but something darker. Something desperate. Dad squeezed my hand under the table. "Avery," he whispered, "whatever happens, remember what I told you about the books in your room." The books. The letter. Suddenly, I understood exactly what I had to do. After Dad collapsed again that evening, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I crept downstairs to check on him, but voices from his study made me freeze in the hallway. "The board meeting is in 2 days, Thomas." Mom's voice was sharp. "You need to sign these papers now. I told you, I want my lawyer to review them first." Dad sounded exhausted. "Your lawyer?" Lucas's laugh was soft, dangerous. "Comión, Thomas. We both know you're not thinking clearly lately. All those medications." I pressed closer to the wall, my heart pounding. "I'm thinking clearly enough," Dad said. "Clearly enough to see what you two are trying to do." We're trying to help, Mom insisted. The company needs new direction, fresh blood. Lucas has connections. Lucas has debts. Dad's chair scraped back. Did you think I wouldn't find out about the gambling? The failed ventures? Is that why you brought him in, Cassandra? To save him or to save yourself? The silence that followed was deafening. Sign the papers, Lucas said finally, all pretense of charm gone. Or your daughter might find out some interesting things about her mother's past. Before she married into money, I bit my lip to keep from gasping. Dad's response was immediate. Leave Avery out of this. Then sign. I couldn't take it anymore. I burst into the study, making them all jump. Don't you dare threaten him. Avery, Mom started, but I cut her off. I heard everything. The gambling, the threats. I pulled out my phone. And so did my voice recorder. Lucas moved faster than I expected, snatching my phone. His smile returned when he saw the screen. It's locked. The recording uploaded automatically to my cloud account. I lied, praying my face didn't give me away. Touch me or Dad again and it goes public. Mom's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she reached for me. Sweetie, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I moved to Dad's side, noting how pale he looked. Now get out. Both of you. They left, but Lucas paused in the doorway. This isn't over. After they were gone, Dad sagged in his chair. That was dangerous, Avery. I had to do something. Ik knelt beside hoyem. And I lied about the recording. I'm sorry. He smiled weakly. I know. But they don't. His hand shook as he opened his desk drawer. There's something else you need to see. Evidence of what they've been planning. I've been gathering it for months. But before he could finish, his eyes rolled back and he slumped forward. This time, I didn't hesitate. Called 911. The hospital waiting room felt like it was closing in on me. 3 hours had passed since they wheeled Dad into emergency surgery, and still no word. I kept staring at his blood on my sleeve, unable to process how quickly everything had fallen apart. Avery. Grandmother Eleanor's voice cut through my daze. She sat beside me, pressing a cup of terrible coffee into my hands. What exactly happened tonight? Before I could answer, Mom burst through the doors, Lucas right behind her. She'd somehow found time to change into a designer outfit like this was another social event to manage. Where is he? She demanded. Why didn't anyone call me immediately? Maybe because you were too busy threatening him, I snapped, standing up. Grandmother's hand tightened on my arm. Cassandra, Lucas, perhaps you should wait outside. He's my husband, Mom said, but her eyes darted to Lucas. And we need to know about the company documents. There are deadlines. Deadlines? My voice cracked. Dad's fighting for his life, and you're worried about paperwork? Lucas stepped forward, all smooth concern. Avery, we're all upset. But your father would want the company protected. Stop. Grandmother's voice was steel. Thomas left specific instructions with his lawyer about the company. Instructions that don't involve either of you. Mom's perfect mask slipped. What instructions? Before anyone could respond, a doctor appeared. Family of Thomas Sinclair? We crowded around him, but I already knew from his face. That terrible, practiced expression of sympathy. I'm sorry, he began. We did everything we could. The world tilted sideways. Through my tears, I saw Mom grab Lucas's hand, saw them exchange a look that made me sick. There are some papers that need signing, the doctor continued. Mrs. Sinclair, if you'll come with me. Wait. Grandmother pulled out an envelope. My son left this with me last week. It's his advanced medical directive and power of attorney. She handed it to the doctor. I believe you'll find I'm the one who needs to sign. Mom's face went white. That's impossible. I'm his wife. And I'm his mother, Grandmother said quietly. He knew what he was doing, Cassandra. Question is, did you? I watched Mom's carefully constructed world crumble, saw the panic in Lucas's eyes, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about protecting Dad anymore. This was about justice. I found something in Dad's study, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Something he wanted me to see. About what you two have been planning. Lucas stepped toward me, but Grandmother moved between us. Touch her, she said softly, and I'll make sure every board member knows about your gambling debts by morning. For the first time, I saw real fear in their eyes. And I knew exactly what Dad had been protecting me from. The day after Dad's funeral, I found myself back in his study, searching for the evidence he'd tried to show me that night. But everything was gone: files, computer, even his personal notebooks. The room felt hollow, stripped bare like my heart. A soft knock made me jump. Grandmother Eleanor stood in the doorway, holding Dad's old leather briefcase. Looking for these? She placed the briefcase on his desk, opening it to reveal a stack of documents and a USB drive. Your father gave these to me last month. Said if anything happened to him, I should wait until after the funeral to show you. My hand shook as I picked up the USB drive. Moment, Lucas. Are at the board meeting right now, she finished, trying to convince everyone they should run the company. She smiled grimly. They don't know about this yet. I plugged the drive into my laptop. Video files appeared, dozens of them. Security footage from Dad's office, recorded conversations, financial records. The truth about Lucas's gambling debts, about Mom's secret accounts, about their plan to take control while Dad was sick. They killed him, I whispered, watching Mom and Lucas discuss forged documents in one video. Maybe not directly, but the stress, the betrayal. Avery, Grandmother started, but the study door slammed open. What a touching scene. Lucas stood there, Mom right behind him. Family bonding over corporate espionage? How dare you, Grandmother began, but Lucas cut her off. The board just voted. His smile was razor sharp. Cassandra and I are now in control. Whatever evidence you think you have is worthless. Mom stepped forward, all false concern. Sweetie, I know you're upset about your father, but this vendetta needs to stop. We're still family. Family. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. You want to talk about family now? I want to talk about your future, she said smoothly. Your college fund, your inheritance, all of that depends on cooperation. The threat was clear. I looked at the video still playing silently on my laptop. Dad's tired face as he recorded his final message, probably meant for me. What would he want me to do? Lucas reached for the laptop. Let's just delete these unfortunate recordings, Zan. No. I grabbed for it, but he was faster. The laptop crashed to the floor, screen cracking. Oops. His smile never wavered. Accidents happen. I stared at the broken pieces of my last connection to Dad, feeling something break inside me too. But then I remembered his words about the books in my room, about having backup plans. You're right, Lucas, I said quietly. Accidents do happen. And sometimes, I met his eyes, seeing the first flicker of uncertainty. Sometimes they happen at board meetings too. The emergency board meeting was already in chaos when I walked in. Mom and Lucas stood at the head of the table, trying to calm the shouting executives. Behind me, Grandmother Eleanor nodded encouragingly. What is the meaning of this? Lucas demanded as I approached. This is a private meeting. About my father's company? I placed Dad's old briefcase on the table. I think I have something the board needs to see. Mom's perfectly manicured nails dug into the table. Avery, don't do this. Do what, Mom? Tell the truth. I pulled out a stack of documents. Like how Lucas has been embezzling money to cover his gambling debts. Or how you helped him forge Dad's signatures while he was dying. The room went silent. Lucas's charm evaporated. You have no proof. Actually, grandmother stepped forward. She has everything. Thomas wasn't as oblivious as you thought. I distributed copies of the evidence to each board member. Dad knew what you were planning. He kept records, made backups. I turned to Mom. He gave you every chance to come clean. You don't understand, Mom's voice cracked. I did this for us. For our future. No. My voice was steady, even as my hands shook. You did this for yourself. And for him. I nodded at Lucas, who was already edging toward the door. Going somewhere? Grandfather Harold's voice boomed as he blocked the exit. The police would like a word about those forged documents. Lucas spun back toward Mom. You said this was foolproof. You promised. Shut up, Mom snapped, her facade finally crumbling. She turned to me, desperate. Avery, please. I'm still your mother. For a moment I saw something real in her eyes, fear, regret, maybe even love. But then I remembered Dad's last days, how she'd been too busy with Lucas to say goodbye. You're right, I said quietly. You are my mother. That's why I'm giving you a choice. I pulled out one final document. Sign control of the company back to the board and walk away clean, or I release everything, including what you did before you met Dad. Her face went white. She knew exactly what I meant. You wouldn't. Try me. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then, slowly, Mom reached for the paper. As she signed, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a deep, aching sadness for what could have been. Dad would have forgiven you, I said softly. That's the difference between you and him. She looked up, tears finally breaking through her perfect mask. And you. I turned away, unable to answer. Some betrayals run too deep for forgiveness. At least for now. 6 months after the board meeting, I stood in Dad's study one last time. The room still held his presence, but it felt different now, lighter somehow. Grandmother Eleanor had helped me pack most of his things, but one task remained. I pulled the last book from his shelf, his favorite collection of Shakespeare. Inside, just as he'd hinted, was one final letter. My dearest Avery, it began. If you're reading this, you've already faced choices I hoped you'd never have to make. But I've watched you grow stronger through all of this, becoming someone who fights for what's right, not just what's easy. A knock at the door made me look up. Mom stood there, thinner now, designer clothes replaced by something simpler. The movers are here, she said softly. For my things. I nodded, watching her take in the half-empty room. After everything, she'd chosen to move across the country, away from the whispers and judgment. Away from Lucas, who'd taken a plea deal and was facing prison time. I found your college acceptance letters, she said. Stanford. Yale. Dad would be proud. He knew. I touched the letter in my hands. He arranged everything, the trust fund, the recommendations. He made sure I'd be okay. And are you? Her voice cracked slightly. Okay. I thought about the past months, the grief, the anger, the final understanding that revenge wasn't what Dad would have wanted. I am yetning Dad. She stepped forward, hesitant. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. You're right, I cut her off. You don't. Not yet. Emits his. But Dad's letter talks about choices. About how we can choose who we become, even after we've lost our way. Understanding flickered across her face. Is that an invitation? It's a possibility. I turned back to the window where grandmother waited by her car. Maybe start with monthly calls. We'll see where it goes. She nodded, tears falling freely now. As she turned to leave, I spoke again. Mom, he forgave you. In the letter. He said everyone deserves a second chance at being better. After she left, I finished reading Dad's letter. The last lines blurred through my tears. Remember, sweetheart, true strength isn't in getting revenge, but in choosing when to offer mercy. Your mother will need that mercy someday. And when that day comes, the choice will be yours. I trust you'll make the right one. All my love, Dad. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my pocket. Sighed, Grandmother waited to drive me to my college visit. Behind me, the empty study held the echoes of everything that had happened here: betrayal, loss, and finally, the possibility of redemption. Some choices change us forever. But sometimes the hardest choice is giving someone else the chance to change too.